Hello, this is Paul the Oaken Knight. Today we're going to talk about Oceans of Fire, the Pacific Theater in World War II, a game recently published by Compass Games and designed by Robert Bema. Today I'm going to give you what I would call an advanced unboxing of the game. At this point, I have not read the rules completely, although I have skimmed through them. I've looked through the player book, and I have read the player's notes and the designer's notes and all that kind of stuff to at least have an idea how the game plays. I've also looked through some of the rule sections that I think are particularly important and actually read them. Let's begin with the components. First, I would put this game in the mini monster category. It's got two full-size maps with over 1,000 counters to put on them, so it's got quite a lot of stuff going on. The maps are 34 by 43, and as I said, you got two of them that link together to form the entire Pacific, plus sections of China and Burma and places such as that. Complexity. Compass Games lists the complexity as 7 out of 10, with solitaire listed also as 7 out of 10. I think the solitaire rating is probably fine based on what I'm seeing here. The game was designed for 3 players, one player being the United States, one player being Commonwealth, the third being the Japanese player. However, the game says that the game is perfectly playable by 2 players and can also accommodate a solitaire playthrough. Playtime for short scenarios is listed as an evening, with the campaign requiring an entire weekend to play. And as usual, words of caution, I rarely find that these estimates for playtime are accurate. They're almost always longer than what they say. Turns are 6 months long, so the campaign game only has 8 turns. Now that might make you think the game is simplistic, like maybe Victory in the Pacific, but that is not the case, as we will soon see. The map. The map is a cardstock map. It is not paper. It is not mounted. It is in between. It is heavy cardstock. Plexiglass is required. The folds are just going to be maybe even worse than a paper map because they're going to come up and it's going to be hard to deal with them. So I would say that you need to have 2 good sheets of plexiglass on top of this map in order to play. It is an area-based game with variable stacking limits that are actually printed on the map. So islands that are small, they're going to have a smaller stacking limit. Whereas if you're in the middle of Australia, you're going to have a rather large stacking limit for how many divisions you can put on the map. The overall look is good. I don't see anything that will interfere with its playability, and it's reasonably attractive just for what it presents. China. Strategic level Pacific games vary in how they treat China. I know a game such as Fire in the Sky, a game that I have reviewed in the past that I actually have on my game table right now and having fun playing, basically don't even include China in the mix. They just simplify it out of existence. But China's main role in the war was simply to soak up most of the Japanese army and inflict as many casualties as they could. So Oceans of Fire uses a compromise approach. It doesn't show all of China as far as representing it in the game, but it does include all of the coastal areas, which is where most of the fighting occurred. So in that sense, you can use China as it was historically, basically soaking up the Japanese army and inflicting as much pain as possible. Player aids. The game includes 8 different types of player aids. Many include multiple copies, so that players don't have to necessarily share a single copy around the table. Player aids include a naval battle board, victory point tracking card, resource tracking card. They say it can be photocopied, so I think this is probably something you scribble on. We'll get to resources later as far as what they do in the game. A double-sided unit key, map key, the terrain effects. Tell you what different types of terrain are on the map and give you an idea of what they do. We have 2 8x11 carrier air displays, plus another one that's 8 by 5.5 inches. I guess maybe the British don't have as many aircraft carriers, something like that, I assume. 8 double-sided player aid cards, 4 of which are unique, and 2 copies of each are provided. 2 double-sided sequence of play cards, and 3 double-sided reinforcement cards, and 3 double-sided force pool cards. That's a lot of cards. And I do like the way they put them in the box as they're nicely banded so they're not going to be rattling around and damaging each other during shipment. The ground units included in the game are 9/16 of an inch, which is a decent size. I prefer 5/8, but 9/16 will do in a pinch. At least it's not half-inch. Again, this is all the air and ground units that are included. Naval vessels are represented by rectangular counters. Each one generally is going to represent 2 vessels, which games like Fire in the Sky also use that level of abstraction. However, in this game, the ships can be sunk individually, so you can have half-strength counters out there representing only one of the 2 ships that are remaining in that counter. All the counters are cleanly laid out and clearly done. I didn't see any issues understanding what was on them once you know what the numbers are. And finally, the 6 sheets of counters are all nicely stored inside of a plastic wrapper. So once again, they are not damaging each other during shipment, and they're not falling out and getting lost in the box. There are 2 rule books included in the game. The Rules of Play, which is a 96-page book containing all the rules except for the advanced rules and the optional rules, and a 67-page playbook, which includes the advanced rules and optional rules, as well as other good things that help you learn the game, as well as help you look things up in the book. The playbook contains 7 pages of advanced rules and 7 additional pages of optional rules. So this puppy is over 110 pages of rules when you throw it all together. The differences between the advanced rules and the optional rules, the book basically says that it's a level of play testing. The advanced rules have all been play tested, some a little bit more than others, but all of them are play tested enough so that the designer is confident that they are wrung out enough for us to enjoy in our games. And the optional rules are a little less play tested, although they have been looked at, they have been play tested. And these can be mixed and matched. You don't have to include any of them, advanced or optional, and you can pick and choose among them from what you want. And in addition, the rules give you an indication as to how much they affect play balance one way or the other. So for example, a given rule might be tagged as Allied 1, which means it's just a small nudge in favor of the Allies, or it might be like Japanese 3, which is a bigger nudge in favor of the Japanese. Players can decide to include a certain set of options on one side, and then the other side could to vary the game. In taking a look at the rule books, I'm thinking that the volume of rules may not be as daunting as it might appear. First, the font used is fairly generous. I have no issues. In fact, I think for me, it's the ideal font size. I actually wouldn't want it to be bigger and smaller. Well, I'm glad it's not smaller. It's just the right size. It's the Goldilocks rule book for font size. Also, the books are filled with diagrams, pictures, and examples, some of which are either full page or nearly a full page. A pretty fair amount of space is devoted to pretty pictures that help you learn the game. The game also includes a 2-page table of contents in the rule book, which I like, and it's a nice chunky full 2 pages, helping you find the right section of the rule book that you're after. And I was first concerned I didn't see an index, but when I opened up the playbook, there is a 6-page combined glossary and index in the back of the playbook, which is really nice. So since it's a combined glossary and index, it's actually kind of better than just an index because it gives you terms definition right by the term, and then if that's not enough for you, then you can look up the rule citation, the page that it gives you to go look up more about a particular rule. I think that's great. So finding rules in this 100-page tome is not going to be as hard as it might otherwise be. In addition, there's a 16-page detailed example of play. Yes, 16-page with lots of big diagrams and stuff to help you learn the game from the developer so that you have a better chance to getting off to a good start. Overall, the rules seem to be well written, and I think that even though there's a lot of them, I think experienced gamers can absorb them. So I would not hold the 100 pages against it. When I was in my 20s, I would read rule books for fun sometimes. I know that's weird, but that's what I did. This I don't think it's going to be too bad. Curl up with your favorite beverage, and I think you will go through this without too much trouble. The game also includes event cards. Now, the event cards are tied to an advanced rule. You don't have to use them. Even so, I think most people will probably use them. At least if you have multiple real people playing, you're probably going to use the cards. If not, it's a judgment call on your part as to how much you think they interfere with solitaire play. Whenever you have cards, if you have secrets, anything secret is inherently unsolitaire friendly, but they might be so much fun that you just can't not use them. 70 cards are divided into 3 national decks. You can tell which deck belongs to who by the flag on the back of the card. The card on top shows the Japanese rising sun motif with the ships in the background. Kind of a cool effect. In addition, there is one common deck of cards that can be used by all players, and that one does not show any national flags, and the reverse is simply printed in black and white. Scenarios. There are 5 scenarios included in the game, a couple of which are training scenarios, I would say. The first is the Solomon Islands. That's just a 2-round scenario. Each turn contains 4 rounds. So this is like half a turn, and it is listed as introductory. The second scenario is the Battle of Midway, 1 full turn. Again, also listed as introductory. So these first 2 are there to help you learn the system, but I don't think you're going to actually play them very much. The third one, though, Japanese expansion, is 3 full turns. And I can tell you, when I was learning Fire in the Sky gives you the option of starting the game after Pearl Harbor, or in game terms, it would be turn 2. I found it valuable because I wanted to play that game from the beginning, just like I'm going to want to play this game from the beginning of the war. So what I did in Fire in the Sky, I just played the Japanese expansion over and over and over the first couple turns until I felt I really had a solid idea of how it worked. And I think you owe it to yourself, rather than diving into the full campaign wherein you don't really understand what the Japanese need to do and how they need to do it. The first couple turns of any strategic War in the Pacific game are crucial for the Japanese. Because if they don't get off to a good start, I mean a really good start, they might as well pack it in. So I think some attention needs to be paid in playing the Japanese expansion scenario. 3 turns. I intend to play that a few times before I dive into the campaign. The fourth is a 2-turn scenario for the Battle of Guadalcanal. That one is, I think, supposed to be a scenario you can come back to and play if you don't want to dive into a full campaign. And the 5th one is the 8-turn full campaign. Mechanics. Each turn, the 3 factions are granted command points. That's a key concept in the game. Reminds me of Pacific War. Japan's command points are based on capturing resources. Resources are required for them to actually receive command points at the beginning of the turn, and expansion in the beginning of the game is crucial for them to have the resources they need to effectively fight going forward. The side that has the most command points is the initiative player for the entire turn and has the first move every round of the turn. Each turn is divided into 4 rounds. But if you start with the most command points at the beginning of one of these 8 turns, you will be the first player in each and every one of the rounds that follow for that turn. So for the Japanese, especially, having the initiative in those first few turns is going to help you a lot to execute the expansion that you absolutely have to do. As I said, each turn is divided into 4 rounds, and command points are split evenly between the rounds. So, say if the Japanese had 16 command points, then each of those command points would be divided evenly to 4 points in each of the 4 rounds during that turn. However, if it doesn't come out evenly, let's say you have a couple points left over, the Japanese evenly allocate leftover command points to the early rounds of the turn. So say if they had 18 points, they would start by putting 4 in each, and then the 2 leftovers, one would be in round 1, one would be in round 2. So they would go 5, 5, 4, 4. The Allies do the same thing, except they put their leftover points in the ending rounds. So say if the Americans had 1 leftover point, it would go in round 4, not in round 1. In addition, Japan has an oil reserve that can be used to give them a couple extra command points. They have 3 to use for the entire game, and they may not be replenished. The Pearl Harbor attack uses up one of these oil reserve points. And again, since they're not replenishable, their use is strategic for the Japanese player. Once the round begins, each command point may be converted to 12 action points. With the map being divided into areas, operations are defined and conducted by the active player to determine what it is they want to go after in that round for the turn. Action points are used to activate air, land, and sea units to go ahead and participate in the operation that's being conducted in the designated area or areas. Each side has their own player turn per round. So if the initiative player goes first, when they have exhausted their command points and activation points, the other side gets to do the same. Note, Pacific War games generally have what I call the midway problem. The midway problem presents itself because the Japanese generally do not lose 4 aircraft carriers in June of 1942. Very few are going to be that stupid or that unlucky. Consequently, there needs to be some other constraint on Japan to prevent overusing their stronger ships that historically they could not use all the time. Fire in the Sky uses an oil resource mechanism to constrain the Japanese to keep them from overusing their aircraft carriers, as an example. Other games, such as the computer game Warplan Pacific, don't contain that sort of constraint. And what you see there when you're playing the Allies is that when you decide to go to Guadalcanal in, say, August of 1942, you are usually greeted by 5 or 6 Japanese aircraft carriers that crush you. And you find out quickly that you may not be able to do anything in that game until like April of 1943 when you start getting the Essex carriers coming in. I think that the resource-bound system presented in Oceans of Fire looks promising in that it's going to work around the midway problem so that the Japanese have realistic constraints on what they can do, even if they don't lose all those aircraft carriers early on in the war. Victory. The game may be won in a couple ways. First, Japan may win a sudden death victory on either turn 3 or turn 6, or the game may go full length to turn 8, where they still have a chance of winning based on the point situation on the map. For many Japanese players, though, the strategy is going to be bound to trying to get the required point count to end the game turn 3. Earlier is better as far as the Japanese are concerned. If the Japanese don't win a sudden death victory and don't have the required points for the end of turn 8, then the Allies will win the game. Strategery. To have the best chance of winning the game, particularly with a sudden death victory early in the game, Japan must decide how it wants to accomplish its goal and then formulate a plan and then stick to the plan to push it through to completion. Options include attacking the Commonwealth aggressively, going for an assault on India if you can get that far. Get your victory points there, and hopefully you'll have enough to end the war early. Or possibly go for Australia. Go ahead and do the invasion of Australia that the Japanese in history decided not to do. Or possibly punish the Americans going after Guadalcanal, the Solomon Islands, and something that resembled the historic campaign, going after Midway Island, oh boy, and doing as much damage to the Americans and hopefully taking as much victory points as you can to get to that magic 30 victory point mark, which will end the game on turn 3. However, there are some issues. First and foremost, the resources in the game, as in history, as in the real world, tended to be concentrated in the Commonwealth areas. So by going after the Americans all out, they may not capture all the resources they need to retain the initiative to push this plan through. So even if the Americans are the primary target, the Commonwealth cannot be ignored. Remember that resources convert over to command points, And the side that has the more command points at the beginning of the turn has the initiative and will be able to do more stuff during the rounds of the turn. That being said, it is noteworthy that more of the victory points are in the U.S. areas. So you have a dichotomy between resources and victory points. They are not one and the same. They are different and may require you to adjust strategy back and forth to get the victory points once you have the resources. To be successful, therefore, Japan must formulate a strategy to get to the automatic victory level by having enough resources to have the command points, to retain the initiative, to push through capturing of victory point areas to give them the win. The longer the game goes, the more the Japanese is going to find out that first this is an attritional game, and as the game progresses to the mid-game, attrition is not their friend. For the U.S. and Commonwealth, their goal is simple in the beginning. They got to survive, especially the Commonwealth, which is the weaker of the two partners. They both need to move forces where Japan is focusing its attention. So if the Commonwealth appears to be the target, they got to hang on to Burma, they got to hang on to places that deny Japan resources for as long as possible. If you can't stop them, at least slow them down. One strategy is to withdraw to India and turn it into Fortress India. I don't know if I like that strategy, but it was certainly mentioned in the player's notes for the game and might be considered. At some point, both the Commonwealth and the United States have to shift to an offensive strategy that will probably happen sometime around turn 4. Possibly turn 3 if things don't go well for the Japanese, but they should be beginning to seize the initiative on turn 4. They should then pick at the Japanese as far as finding some weak spots, doing some damage, and the farther the game progresses, at some point, the Americans especially are going to romp and stomp, not care about losses, and just go for it. Things that you saw in real life are covered in the game, either in the base, optional, or advanced rules, such as kamikazes are here. There's a card that has the atomic bomb, so it is possible to drop the atomic bomb in the game to possibly end the war. And so I think that the game gives a lot of options as far as how you go about pursuing your victory goals, whichever side you're on. So, again, this is intended to be more of an unboxing than a strategy guide, or certainly not a deep dive where I'm going to make a recommendation whether I like the game or not. I haven't played this one yet, but from what I see, it looks interesting. I think it's something that I would like to get on the table. As a two-mapper, I certainly have the space with my table here to be able to do that. With all those player aids, though, it could be more of a stretch than you think. So I have to see how much real estate it takes to lay out all the players' aids in addition to the map itself. But this is definitely a meaty, non-trivial game. Don't be fooled by the fact that it's 8 turns. That's not something you should be concerned about. It is a mini monster. It is area-based. It is interesting. I think the rule books are solid. I think the supporting materials are solid. I particularly like the example of play, the glossary/index, the combined glossary index, and the card descriptions. I don't think I mentioned that all the cards are described in a section of the playbook, and so if you have any questions as far as what they mean or why they're there and what they do, that is included as well. So with all of that, I think for an unboxing, I have to say I'm happy with what I'm seeing. The quality is very good to high. I think the only thing that bothers me a little bit is the cardstock map is not going to lay flat unless you have plexiglass. It's just too thick. Maybe if you backbend it some, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to put plexi on and go with it from there. That's about it. If you've stuck with me this far, I do appreciate it. If you are new to the channel, I'd ask that you go ahead and hit the subscribe button, hit a thumbs up, hit the notification bell so that you can keep track of what we do here. If you are done all those things already, I simply say thank you oh so very much for being a valued subscriber to this channel. But for now, this is Paul the Yoka Knight wishing you all a pleasant evening. Bye for now.